with us. It's a live tank. Boy, Vinny wishes he were here, sitting on this couch. This might be television history with Darnell and Al in the same room. Eric in charge of keeping them apart. I don't think anybody's going to fight about this one. It's just heartbreaking, and you see the people gathering there. We talked to Steve Goncalves, the Goncalves family attorney, earlier, and they don't want to call it an anniversary because these families are just being tortured. It's taking so long. Al, there's no trial date. Yes, it's a quad murder with a death case, but that's a bit odd. Is it at least throw out a possible trial date to give people something to hold on to?
Well, you don't want to get people's hopes up for something and then have it delayed. I think that's worse. I think the anticipation of a date certain gives these people the idea that this is going to be done. And as we all know, trials are not that way. I mean, everything gets adjourned. There's always a good reason, and then there's always a reason the judge will give it. An adjournment. So you give these people a cold, hard date, they're all set, ready to go, doing everything they need to do, and then it's adjourned. That up and down is probably worse.
Erica, why are we so fascinated by this case? Is it the victims or the crime and the horror that people just can't get their head around?
It's both. Right? Like my daughter turns 18 on Thursday, right? So she's going to college, and for all the parents who have children, right, to think that you send your child to college in a small town in Idaho, no less, you think that you're sending them to a safe place. So for this to happen to not only one student, but 4 students is something that is literally unthinkable. And so everybody, the nation is kind of gripped by this because it's like, we want to make sure, how did this happen? What were the signs? How could we all do better to make sure it doesn't happen? And then you have that, juxtapose that, and then you have Bryan Kohberger. And this guy is clearly one of the most narcissistic sociopaths. He thinks he's smarter than everybody in the room, and he's playing all these legal maneuvering games. And so we're kind of fascinated by him as well. For whatever reason, this country is always fascinated with the murderers and the serial killers and that sort of thing. And so we have that juxtaposition of he's kind of titillizing and tantalizing, and then you have the tragedy of these 4 innocent students who were literally just going off to educate themselves. And so we really want to figure out, because we still don't know. We think we know the who, we know the what, we don't know the why.
Right, and we may never, Darnell, because unless he or whoever did this, he's just accused, tells everybody why, it could be, he could be, we'll never know, right? But do you think at the end of the day there was a connection? We had his phone, according to that affidavit, in the area 12 times, 5 months prior during that period. Do you think whoever did this was targeting and there was a connection?
Absolutely. These are definitely crimes of opportunity. When the kids are on college campuses, people seem to know their comings, their goings, and for whatever reason, they're watching these kids, whether it's economic opportunity or some sexual fantasy or mental breakdown that somebody's having. These kids are like sitting ducks. And as Erica just said, you send your kids to school, they're in one specific space, and they can just get picked off. And that's what's kind of disheartening. And the fact that Kohberger, or somebody that we would least expect, I think is astonishing.
Yeah, and they did nothing wrong. And Steve Goncalves was talked, and he has racked his head. What could I have told Kaylee to do differently? Nothing. They went out. They had the buddy system. They took a professional driver home. It was a very short, area. They did everything right. They were literally in their beds when this took place. Al, the most compelling evidence at this point from this probable cause affidavit is the DNA on that knife sheath. Let's say you're defending this individual. Not saying you would, but if you were, how do you get around that?
Well, I mean, that's a tough call. That's going to be the hardest thing in this entire case, and it's going to fall on that. The interesting thing is that if that is the best thing that they have, that one little aspect of DNA, maybe the rest of the case isn't as strong. And that's where things get a little dicey. You know, you mentioned about why Okay, well, prosecution doesn't have to prove motive, and that's never a situation, but that's something that everyone wants to know. And that may be the thing that Kohlenberger may be able to use for his advantage at some point to say, put their minds at ease, let me tell you why this happened, and work out a plea arrangement that way.
Cut a deal, avoid the death.
In terms of DNA, there's definitely going to be a transfer argument because the professor's on the campus, the kids are on the campus, and DNA transfer is a huge area of criminal law that we talk about. I could touch this chair, you could touch it, and my DNA could be somewhere where you went later.
Right, you're never in that room or touch that item. Let's do this. Let's go back to that video because there is a new speaker now talking specifically about one of the victims. Let's listen.